Hello and welcome to today's episode of Crypto. My God, we have some exciting tech updates. There's actually some really cool shit that was built and launched this week. Let's get right into it. First and foremost, we have a very large release coming from the Ethereum blockchain. This is the Pectra upgrade. It's been debated for a long time, and basically the process for an upgrade in Ethereum, which is actively decentralized and really has to go through a democratic process, is again these EIPs, these Ethereum improvement proposals. And they generally go through debate. They are first presented as an academic sort of authorship, after which people get to read them, respond to them. And ultimately, after enough conversation and debate, they will be finalized and agreed upon to be added to a subsequent update. So this update itself contains quite a few of these EIPs. Now, what does it do? Because there's actually some things that I am very excited about in terms of the Ethereum versus Solana competition and just how the Ethereum ecosystem itself feels, because this is very much a user-facing upgrade. So let's look at it quickly. This is coming directly from the Ethereum organization, so the Ethereum account on X, if you want to get a recap yourself. And of course, we're looking at the merge was for the protocol. Pectra is for the people. So really saying that this is a UX improvement. So what is Pectra? A lot, right? And looking at the UX, they're saying fewer clicks, smarter wallets, cheaper transactions, cleaner staking. Let's break it down. Now, fewer clicks. This is probably the most exciting part to me, which is that no more approve plus confirm loops. If anyone in the Ethereum ecosystem remembers, when you make a transaction, you get one signature that you have to pop up and click approve, and that costs gas. Then after that processes and finalizes in a block, you get to do the actual transaction or the actual execution of the action, right? So for any transaction, you need to approve and then confirm. And that's really annoying. Solana came out, it had a single click. Not only was it faster and cheaper, but when a window pops up for you to execute a transaction, you click it and it's done. And in my opinion, I think the approvals, as small as they are, were one of the main weak points in the Ethereum ecosystem. Once you get used to a single click, you're just like, what the hell is this double click? It doesn't make any sense. Now, smarter wallets, this is pretty fun. They used to just hold keys, now they've got a brain. So what happens now is that Ethereum wallets can basically act like a smart contract. This means that you can batch transactions. Let's say you want to send a token to 100 wallets. You would previously either have to create a smart contract to do that, go from wallet to smart contract to token distribution. Now you can do it straight out of a wallet. This means that there's more opportunities for automation across the board. So basically think of wallets being able to execute smart functions. Now, one thing that's really cool is that you can actually pay for gas in any token. I think this is going to be massive. This means an application could launch where the gas fees are paid in stable coins. This means you no longer have the volatility or expectations around ETH as a gas asset, and that you can really understand firmly what those gas costs are going to be. Or maybe people just prefer to spend in something that's less of a store of value, right? It's one of my gripes with apps on Bitcoin now is like, I just don't want to use Bitcoin for gas. Are you kidding me? It's a store of value. Now, conversely, a very fun upgrade is that dApps, or decentralized apps, can also cover the gas fees. So if there's a new app that comes on to the Ethereum network and it wants to bring on all these users, it can actually pay for their gas fees. It means that they can just engage with it like a Web2 app. They'll still have to sign transactions, but that gas fee is being paid by a third-party provider. So you can see that there's a lot of really interesting automation capabilities. Cheaper transactions is obviously a win. Pectra upgrades Ethereum's ability to handle data. So this is about blob space. And what's really coming down to is that they opened up the blob space from 3 to 6, and in really high times of traffic, it can expand to 9. Now, blobs are like RAM, they're temporary data storage. They are the primary value capture mechanism in Ethereum today, moving away from the fees being paid directly to the L1, right? Transaction fees, any sort of swap fees, things of that nature, to really relying on L2s to use this RAM space, this temporary memory, to complete their transaction set, finally pinning it into the ETH L1. So more blob space means more transaction data from the L2s, hopefully meaning more fees. So not only does this cheapen the transactions across Ethereum on a whole, the idea is that it increases the revenue generation capabilities of Ethereum. It's something they're still going to have to tackle. They did give away a lot of the upside to the L2 ecosystem. However, maybe that meant that onboarding L2s was a massive win. This is a long tail play that's hard to see, but for now, the L2 trade-off isn't looking super strong. Now, staking being upgraded, I mean, that's a little bit niche, but they did raise the validator cap from 32 ETH to 2048. This is just something that when you get into larger staking operations becomes a burden, right? Think how many more machines you have to spin up at 32 ETH stake versus 2048. So this is something about scalability. It also means that if you're an Ethereum holder and you have more than 32 and you want to stake, you can now do it under one machine rather than having to split it. There's also some speed enacted in that, and of course, smart contract enabled withdrawal. So this will be really big for the liquid staking assets like Lido, like Rocket Pool, and just anyone that's running Ethereum staking. Still means that you can do it at home, which is the key point of Ethereum, that spread out distributed ecosystem and validation system. But it also means that if you have a little bit more than 32 ETH, you can use it. You can put it to work. Now, unlocking the $490 billion of potential, they're basically saying Ethereum handles so much money, but the UX isn't great. We're upgrading the UX. Bada boom, bada bing. We're going to increase the amount of stablecoin utility on top. And this makes a lot of sense. Again, paying for gas and stablecoins, very reasonable, very rational. In many ways, I feel like that's where gas should actually be denominated. So I think that's really fun and interesting. And of course, better apps, better user experience just means more utility. So that's pretty straightforward. And of course, they talk about how hard it is to pull off one of these upgrades, like the merge. Upgrading a decentralized network that secures billions is like swapping an airplane engine mid-flight. And that is the core of the machine, right? The thing that is taking the transactions, turning them over, is actually being swapped out. And that sort of sums up this mega release. This has been in the works for years. Lots of debate, lots of infighting, lots of alignment and agreement to get this thing pushed through. And it took all of yesterday to upload it. Now it's finally there. We should start to see some of those improvements come live. Now, in a different but equally interesting release, and this came out yesterday, was Coinbase coming out with the new X402 standard for the internet native payments. This is something I honestly hadn't really considered and thought about. It's a little bit deep into the weeds of the web, but it's really cool and expansive around everything that we can do with cryptocurrencies. So here's the TLDR. What they did was dive into a sort of ancient and antiquated relic of the 1992 internet. It's still there, and the original standard is called HTTP 402 payment required. And basically what this meant was that APIs, which are the way an application interacts with the internet or an app interacts with another app, it's basically a key that allows you to unlock the utility and functioning of an app, had this payment option. What's really happened is that since then we've kind of had software as a service, and it's all wrapped up in a much firmer sort of API key where they actually sell you or lease you a key to their application for a monthly subscription fee, something like that, where basically the transaction fees get bundled. Now, Coinbase looked at this and said, hey, we can actually introduce this line of code that allows this relic of a internet facility to make individual payments using blockchain. So the major pivot here now is that if a piece of code wants to access a piece of software, rather than having to subscribe to an API for, let's say, a month, let's say a year, something to that effect, it can pay per use. It can basically ping that application and say, hey, I've got some stable coins. I want to run a travel search and buying a plane ticket. And it can spend a little bit of stablecoin capital in order to pay that application to run. Remember, applications are being hosted on client-side servers. There are a lot of fees. That's why they need to charge to maintain these. Now we have this sort of ability to have another app or a wallet, like in Ethereum Pectra, reach out and say, I only want to use you once. I'm willing to have a conversation as to what that price is going to be. And what X402 does is allow the applications to pay for that one-off utility. Now, this really expands to AI agents. If we're going to give them control of our Web3 wallets, obviously they can't do this on traditional banking rails. The reality of a lot of our fintech software, like Robinhood, like even Zelle, is that it's just a pretty user interface over a very antiquated set of technology and the banks. And in a nutshell, the AI agents, they just can't access that. You need a personality, you need KYC AML, you need approvals throughout the process. Now, with Web3 wallets and X402, you can basically fund an AI agent and say, hey, if you want to go out and access any application on the internet, you now have a little bit of capital. You can directly pay them over this X402 pipeline. So this is really unlocking the entire internet for AI agents to use blockchain to interact with the internet itself and the applications at large. It's really cool. It's highly scalable. It's something that kind of came out of the weeds. So props to Coinbase for pushing forward technology in this way. But I mean, when you think about the adoption curve of everything going on in AI and in the digitization of finance or value, which is crypto and blockchain, we are now just expanding the reach that an autonomous agent can do, anything that an AI agent can do and execute on its own autonomously. So you're no longer going to need a human to reach out to that API to facilitate the purchase of the API key. This allows the agents to do it entirely on their own. So this is huge for both the adoption of just an autonomous internet as well as for expanding the reach of blockchain. And again, when people say, you know, this is all a scam, it's like, sure, there's a lot of scams happening on top, but this is obviously the future. This allows machines and the internet to interoperate with each other, not just on a data layer, but on a value layer as well. So this is really cool. I will absolutely provide this article inside of the sources link. I think you should dive in. This could be one of the biggest upgrades to the blockchain space, honestly, that I've ever seen. And I don't say that lightly. So this is very exciting. It's very welcome for me to bring forward some positive technological development news. We have seen things like Gabe Shapiro's business startup, that application from Lexnode that allows businesses to actually form their legal entities and to do the capital raising all on chain. It saves legal costs. It allows for expansive functionality, especially if you're talking about a tokenized business. Now we're seeing X402, of course, the Ethereum Pectra upgrade, and there's some very substantial pieces of tech that are being released. They are definitely in the weeds of specialty at the moment, but this is how we build the applications that eventually get the mass adoption and take over the world. Suffice it to say, if you're young, if you're a kid these days, I mean, this technology is going to be what you're going to hop on. I've had some interactions with the bank lately, and just the more you use the legacy system, the more dated it feels. So this is all really refreshing. Of course, with the explosion of AI, we are going to have them adopting blockchain. We may not need the humans to adopt it because the AIs are so crypto native. Remember, AI is a post-blockchain technology. That's a kind of wild thing to think about. That means blockchain is like old news in the land of autonomous agents. So with that being said, good luck, everybody. Stay safe out there, and I will see you tomorrow.